Mr. Scary Studios. Number one.
This is a story of why you should be back before it gets dark. You never know what can happen. I unfortunately learned this the hard way. I looked at my watch as it was already 8 p.m. My dog Jessie had enough walking for the day, so I decided to go back to my apartment. Now, usually in other cities, people are laid back and are not that worried about time. But that's not the case for me. I'm from Detroit, and staying out at night here is an idiot's choice. My apartment is just 15 minutes away. On the right is the Bill Green's Forest Park, which is an open park full of trees and a lot of walking space. And to my left is the road. There isn't much people out now also. Nobody would anyway unless they wanted to be robbed. Now I'm getting closer to the apartment and Jesse is getting tired. I pat him and say, "We're nearly there." A few seconds later I hearing motorbike sounds, and I see a biker approaching me. As he whizzes past me and Jesse, he grins in a cheap, creepy way, like he was about to shoot us. He was also wearing red face paint, probably because he was in some kind of gang. His eyes were black in color, and I saw something in him I couldn't describe. As he whizzed past, he turned his bike to face me. Before I could have a single thought, he started biking towards me in high speed. I then grabbed Jesse and jumped into the bushes, which was on the right of us. Luckily, there was a shortcut that could be taken through the woods. I turned back and saw that he was trying to reverse his bike and chase me down. I ran as fast as I could. I was scared, but I tried to act as brave as I could. I told Jesse to quiet down, or he'd find us. I hid behind a tree for a few seconds to get some energy back. I saw the spotlight of his bike shine right past me. To my horror, now the spotlight shined on the exact tree I was standing behind, and I thought I was screwed. My heart sank, but the biker did not seem to notice me and just carried on through the woods, maybe because I was wearing a black sweater and grayish black track pants. Now, without seizing a moment, me and Jesse ran so fast on to our apartment, our legs started to pain. I collapsed on the bed and dialed 911. I told them what happened, and they said that they'd investigate. So far, I did not get any updates. But creepy red painted face biker man, let's not meet again.
Number two.
I live in a country where public housing is the norm, with many high-rise blocks forming each estate. The estates generally have study spaces on the ground floor. It is also a relatively safe place, hence it's common to see people out and about till late. I was 19 and cramming for an exam, thinking that the night breeze could clear my head and speed things up. I decided to head for a study space at the ground floor to continue revising. When I was all settled in at a table, a man in his mid-30s took a seat at my table. I was decidedly peeved and inwardly grousing the fact that he chose to do so despite all the other tables being empty. It did not take long before he attempted to engage in idle chatter. I was never fond of chatting to strangers, but my monosyllabic responses and morose expression seemed to spur him on to share a great deal of unsolicited information about himself. That he was running a successful car rental business and the intricacies of it all. It was all a yawn, and it was just wondering how much revision time had seeped away from him as he commented, "Well, I understand that your brother has to leave the house early for school, but your parents, 6 a.m. is quite an early time to start work." My blood ran cold then. his detailing of family's schedule was entirely accurate, but I had never seen him in my entire life. Hastily excusing myself, I fled from home. Standing by my room window, I was frantically dialing a friend's number to screech about this strange encounter. Just then a figure waved to me from the opposite block. It was just near enough for me to make out that it was the same man from earlier.
Number 3.
I could not believe my luck when my childhood friend Lucy told me she'd be visiting. I told her that the timing was horrible, as I had just broken my leg and live on the 5th floor of a rundown building with no elevator. However, being the bestie that she's been ever since we were children, she thought it'd be perfect so she could give me a hand. Sleepishly, I accepted. I had never dreaded living alone until I had this cumbersome past put on, and her company was more often welcome. It has been now a full week since Lucy arrived. We spent the first days reminiscing about our games as girls. Inevitably, we turned the conversation as to why we haven't been in touch for so long. It was such a strange thing to drift apart for no apparent reason, but we were happy that as new adults we could catch up. Lucy must not have had an easy time these past years. I could tell she hardly sleeps, has haunting dark circles under her eyes. She also hadn't been taking very good of herself. So thin, and I can see that she just pretends to eat. I didn't want to pry, so I figured she'd tell me on her own time. So I tried to make the best of it. Digital cameras were not a thing back then, so we were always a bit bummed at the fact that we had no real pictures together. Just the ones we would draw. So we took advantage and took selfies constantly in the week to make up for lost time. So many questions left unanswered with Lucy and our childhood, but ever since my mother called to check up on me, there are a couple that I found particularly in need of answering. Honey, what do you mean your friend Lucy is visiting? You don't mean your imaginary friend from when you were 4, certainly. Shaking, I opened the camera gallery on my phone to check our recent pictures. But no, there she is, in the photos with me, just as I see her in real life. I sighed in relief, excluding the possibility of my insanity. But then, who is Lucy? What has she been doing all these years? Why come and visit now? If it is not the real Lucy, how does this person know so many details from our past? Dread begins to return as I ask myself, has she been waiting for me to be crippled to visit? Why is she really not eating? Why is she knocking at the door now?
Number 4.
Every night I try to avoid sleep because I know what follows. I was just a kid thinking he could do some good in the world, but the world chewed me up and spit me out. When I dream, I see the sand beneath my boots, the sand that had been stained with the blood of my comrades, my brothers. The canvas of sand turned the blood that fell on it a darker, more sinister crimson. The fighting was over, but in the birth of a new trial. I've never had to face worse than any skirmish, a battle in my head. I look around the room. My enemies are dead around me. Whenever I shot, I aimed for the head. My enemies did not. Echoing around the room and invading my ears are the sounds of my allies, choking on their own blood, the blood staining their teeth as they grimace in pain. I wish I could say I held their hand and told them. I would tell their families about all the brave things they did that day. Maybe make their deaths a little easier, but all I did was watch. That is what I regret the most. Barnes was the toughest man I ever met. I saw him in the corner of the room. He grasped as tightly as he could, with that little strength remained to a picture of his newborn daughter that he'd never get up to hold. Tears fell down his dirt-encrusted face. The tears cleaned the dirt a little. His last thoughts were with her, as his breathing slowed to a halt. Kyle was full of life. Dreams, kindness, emotion, and ambition, all of that was gone. As I looked into his face, eyes wide open, everything that made Kyle him was gone. All of the funny facial expressions he would get to get all of us to laugh. After a horrible day, all of his aspirations to become a comedian cut short by the end of a bullet. Kyle was my best friend, slumped over in the middle of the room, in a pool of his own blood. We joined together, we grew up together, we did everything together. I remember the sleepless nights playing Halo 3 as I stared into his quickly decaying eyes. "I'm sorry," he told me as he coughed and spewed the blood under his chin. He was the one dying, but yet he apologized to me. That's when I awakened screaming in terror. Every time I sleep, I'm reminded of the horrors I saw that day, permanently burned into my brain. Never allowed to forget. I'm a prisoner in my own body, and my brain threw away like the key. I'm scared to sleep. I tell them all that I'm sorry every night, even though they'll never hear it. I tell them I'm sorry because they died, and I didn't.